All right, and we are also live streaming this on Facebook. So we've got some folks both on Zoom and on Facebook. Thank you all for being here. We'll give it another minute or so. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody who is tuning in. This is the second of our fall speaker series, the topic Design for Dying, Aging, and Dignity. I'm very excited for all speakers in this series, and also very excited for tonight's talk, which is by Katrina Spade from Recompose. Hey, Katrina, thanks for being here. So the title of the talk is Recompose, Returning Our Dead to the Earth. I can't count the number of people I've talked to that are like, I just want to be a tree after I die. And this is a very exciting way to make that happen in a very tangible way that we all know, as we all have put our hands in the soil at one point or another. Katrina Spade is a designer and the inventor of a system that transforms the dead into soil, aka human composting. In 2017, Katrina founded Recompose, a public benefit corporation with the goal of offering earth-centric, participatory, and meaningful death care. Recompose has led the successful legalization of human composting in Washington State, Oregon, and Colorado. In 2020, Recompose began offering the service of human composting to the public. Katrina and her team have been featured in Fast Company, NPR, The Atlantic, BBC, Harper's Magazine, and the New York Times. She's an Echoing Green Fellow, an Ashoka Fellow, and a Harvard Kennedy School visiting social innovator. And Katrina is tuning in from Colorado, but Recompose is based in Seattle, Washington, on the land of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. And I'm tuning in from Yestermorrow, and we are on Abenaki land. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Katrina. Oh, just kidding, one more thing. If anybody has questions as the talk goes on Zoom, you can enter them in the Q&A box. And if you're tuning in on Facebook Live, you can enter them in the chat and ask them as they come up, and we will ask them all of Katrina at the end. Now I'll pass it off to you, Katrina.
Thank you, Rachel. Appreciate it. I want to also say I'm a proud alum of Yestermorrow Design Build School, and was also proud to serve on the board for a couple of years, but it's been a while since I've been there. So it's no exaggeration to say that my journey to getting here started, I want to say maybe 15 years ago at Yestermorrow, when I started flexing, I guess, realizing that I think everybody has design muscles that we can choose to flex or not. But Yestermorrow really gave me the tools to do that, and to kind of see that there was a way to do that that felt really personally meaningful and aligned with my values. So huge thank you in advance to Yestermorrow for everything that school has done to get Recompose where it is. All right, now I will turn off my own view because it's very distracting to see your own face when you talk. Like Rachel said, I'm excited to answer questions. I'm going to go through these slides, have my slides as a guide, go through them relatively quickly, and leave plenty of time for questions. So put them in the chat, put them on the Facebook thingy, and we'll answer anything that hasn't been touched upon at the end. So the mission of Recompose is to shift the world's perspective on human mortality. Just that, it's a small mission, you know, just the whole world's perspective. We're doing so by creating a radical regenerative death care option for all. Specifically, my passion and my journey in life is about making human composting available to the wider public. Recompose was founded in 2017, like Rachel said, we're a public benefit corporation, and we're the first facility in the world to offer natural organic reduction, the first company also, AKA human composting. So if I say natural organic reduction, or NOR, that is a fancy legal term for human composting. And on a daily basis, I remind myself that death is a natural part of life. That happens because I think because I'm working in death care. And I do believe it can help us embrace our mortality, remember that we're part of the natural world, not just living in it, but part of it. And for me anyway, it can make me feel much more connected to the earth around me and the planet. So I love this work. And then I also love Walt Whitman, so I have to put this quote here. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. That really captures the ethos of Recompose in so many ways. And I think the boot soles really gets me, because in the end of it all, what we're trying to do by turning people into soil is to both embrace ourselves as part of this ecosystem you see in front of you, and also take a little less seriously our role as humans even, and to say, like, in the end, we are just dirt, and it's okay if that dirt is under a boot, you know. So I love that quote for these reasons. I started this work soon after I was at Yestermorrow, when I was in grad school for architecture at UMass Amherst. And I got very personally interested in this design, this system humans have designed to care for the dead. So architecture, as you know, isn't only about buildings. It can be about systems that humans have created more broadly. And I got pretty fascinated by the funeral industry. And it's one of those industries, in fact, I would say it's the industry that has not been touched for a long time. And the reason is pretty obvious. It's because socially and emotionally, we're afraid to talk about death. And so if you're afraid to talk about death, you're more likely to let a funeral industry, an industry, take care of it for you. And what that's done, especially in the US, is first and foremost, it's created a death care practice that elevates embalming. Only in the US and Canada is embalming practiced with any regularity. And embalming is meant to stop the decomposition process. I feel like that's all you need to say. Why are we trying to stop the decomposition process, right? That's a beautiful thing that's creating soil all over the world. So, but there's a lot of waste inherent in both conventional burial and cremation. Pollution via cremation, waste and emissions via the production of all this stuff for conventional burial. And if I don't touch on natural burial, I'll try to do that somewhere in this talk. If I don't touch on it, maybe we'll come back to it at the end. But what really got me was these two practices, conventional burial and cremation, and the fact that over 50% of Americans are now cremated, and that number is rising really quickly. So it's just a default. People are choosing it for the most part, not because it's a faith-based practice, which it is for millions of people all over the world. But here in the US, it's mostly as a default because it's cheaper, because it's perceived to be less environmentally harmful, which is not the case, and because it feels simpler. So this was the design challenge I was tackling in grad school. Why are these the main options we have, and can't we do better? None of you who are familiar with Yestermorrow will be surprised that I look to nature for a solution. That is what we do at Yestermorrow. That's the whole, point of the school and of the work. I was really grateful to take a permaculture design certification class there and start to think about really trying to mimic and emulate nature's processes whenever possible. And as we all know, nature does death really, really well. When organic material dies, falls from the trees, chipmunks die, there's a stick over there, some ferns that have passed away, if you will, that dead organic material all decomposes to create soil. And that is a precious, precious resource. It takes a long time to create it, as you all know. And but yet it's happening all over the world. This is how nature does death. And so I started to early on say, like, how could Recompose, then just me in grad school, and later the Urban Death Project, how could we how could we take that natural process and make it happen for humans? And I'll get into for humans, I should say, but not just for humans out in the world in the forest, but for humans in cities. So I started focusing on, or the question is not, can we do death naturally, but it is also, how can we do death naturally in our cities where most of us live? And so I really got focused on the urban centers and trying to bring nature into the city, rather than have us die and leave the city to go be buried in the ground, say in a natural burial ground, which is a beautiful concept that cannot really solve for all of us, right? Because every single one of us will die. Most of us live in cities. This will continue forever, as long as we humans are around. So I started to look at composting, and specifically in-vessel composting, which is something that farmers have done for decades here in the US. And for those of you, I hope that some of you on the call know Kate Stevenson, my oldest friend, one of my dearest friends, and former executive director of Yestermorrow. Kate was the one who called me on the phone and said, did you know that farmers are composting whole cows? And I thought, it was just like one of those boom, or like a light bulb moment, or whatever you want to have it be. And I thought, well, obviously, if you can compost a cow, you can compost a human. And so Kate's call really started this thinking. Okay, well, it's happening on farms. I mean, farmers are using wood chips and manure and composting cows. Sometimes they're doing it outside on just in the farm yard. Sometimes they're doing it in windrows, long windrows, and sometimes they're doing it in vessel. And so I started to focus on the question of, could we compost humans in vessel? This is a diagram created to show the basic cycle. I'll get in, I think I'll switch from the side pretty quick, but the general idea of this circular system, the vessel is included. We use microbes to do all the work, and we don't have to inoculate them. They just exist on our skin. They're on me right now. They're in the air. They're on wood chips. They're on straw. They're in alfalfa. And we create soil, and that goes back to create new life, and onwards and onwards. It continues. I hesitated to put this slide in because it's a lot of text, which you're not supposed to do when you're doing a talk. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things. First of all, I graduated from architecture school, and my thesis was called A Place for the Urban Dead. And it was a building in New York City where humans would be composted. And I recall presenting this thesis and having people just nod. Rather, they were doing a little laughing, but mostly nodding, and no one was saying this is ridiculous. And that started me thinking, like, maybe this is not ridiculous. Maybe it's not just something that Kate Stevenson and my parents think is a good idea. It might be something that is more broadly exciting to people. So after grad school, I applied for and received a fellowship through Echoing Green, which gave me enough money to quit everything else and work fully on this project. And in the subsequent years, as the Urban Death Project, a nonprofit, we did early proof of concept. We did a lot of figuring out if there was a community for this, like, do people really want this? And then in 2017, realizing that I needed a fair amount of capital, that's money, to make this actually work, I decided to start a company, Recompose, which is a public benefit corporation, which does have a very strong environmental and social emotional goals, alongside being profitable so that we can be sustainable and grow and be where people want to be composted. So some of the things I just want to touch on with this milestone slide is the fact that we did a human pilot with Washington State University to show that the process was safe and effective. Then we led successful legalization. So the process wasn't legal anywhere in the US. You can cremate, you can bury, you can donate your body to science in most states. In, I think it's 17 states, you can also do something called alkaline hydrolysis, which is a alkaline-based dissolving of a body, which they call water cremation, and it's much less energy intensive than flame cremation. And then now in 3 states, you can do natural organic reduction or human composting. And we raised many millions, not many millions, we raised $6.75 million in order to open, to get going and to open our first facility. And COVID hit all in the middle of this planning. And so we actually ended up opening a slightly smaller facility than we had planned, and started with 10 vessels, which I'll get to, and now have 15. And just to say that our plans are to expand in an organic, thoughtful way, but we have big ambitions because we really want to make sure that we are where people need us and want us. And the reality of a body, when you're composting a body, is like, you can't just make an app and have it go away. Like, it is a very analog process. You need a place, you need the vessel where the body will go. And so just to say that, like, we need to be many places in order to make this available to people, which is an interesting challenge that we have. Oh, I'm going to zip through this. This work could not have happened without the most amazing advisory team, leadership. Our team continues to grow, but some of the people on this slide, from design to legal to, death doula work through soil science. I mean, it has really been a multifaceted, it's a very many fields kind of practice and project. And I found amazing people to help move this forward. Okay, in December of 2020, we opened what we call the greenhouse. This is our 10 vessel array you see behind this team. I love this photo because on this day, we were starting the process. We were opening the facility the next day. And so I do think we're all proud here, and we're also a little bit nervous. There's like a certain apprehension that you can read, or at least I can see on our faces. But this is a small portion of the team. And those vessels now today host bodies in them. Each body spends 1 month inside of a vessel. I sometimes call it a hotel for the dead. You're alone in that little vessel. It's all for you. You spend a month there. During that time, well, first we lay the body into a mixture of wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. That's the perfect balance of carbon and nitrogen materials. And then we, during that month process, we aerate the vessel by exhausting air. And that air runs through a filtration system to take care of any odors. But you all know, if you're doing good composting and you're really paying attention, you have the right mix of everything, there's very little bad odor to the process. And that is the case here as well. After a month, we take the soil out of the vessel. Our staff screen for non-organics like your titanium hip or knee. And we also then break down what's left of the bone, which is larger bone, some of the larger bone fragments. We break that down so it's very small, and everything goes into a cure bin. Because we use so much feedstock or plant material, every person creates about a cubic yard of soil. That's a lot. So I'll get to what some of the uses are for that later, but I want to make sure I keep moving. Here's a box. One thing that happens with the soil is every family, after someone's died, every family gets a small box of soil. If they want the full box, that is the cubic yard is absolutely available to them as well. But many of our families, about 50%, have chosen to donate it to conservation projects. And so there's this like really beautiful connection to the land that soil goes to, because their person helped make it, or is helping to regenerate the land through conservation projects. This is also a lot of text. It's probably a little too much. On the left, is, like I said, is the small box we send people of the soil that's created by their person. On the right, we really have sort of 2 services at Recompose. First of all, we're a full service funeral home. We decided early on, we didn't just want to be a disposition service or a disposition center where it's purely the breakdown of the body. There's many crematories out there, for example, whose main job is just the cremation. And then you might work with a funeral home separately. What we wanted to do with Recompose is have the client experience be all encompassed. So you call us when someone dies, and we'll take you through everything with our services team, transform your body into soil. First we'll transport your body to our location in the Seattle area. Then we transform you into soil. We have what we call a laying in ceremony, which is the placing of the body into a vessel. We currently do that on Zoom because of the pandemic. We went to a virtual service model, which has worked out fairly well. But we are planning on building out, we are in the active planning of building out a larger facility where people can come and have a service on site. And then the other service we do is called Recompose, which you might guess means a way to pre-arrange for your future death care with us. And so it eventually will mean you have a Recompose service, but it's a way for people to sign up today. We have folks as young as 20 who've signed it, probably 18, who have signed up for the service, and you can pay a monthly fee towards your future service with us. And Recompose puts that money into trust and hangs on to it until the time when you die. This picture is a little more indicative of how we feel these days. This is a different mix of people for the most part. We now have 16 Recompose staff members. We have 15 vessels in operation now. And as of this month, I think we've transformed about 75 individuals into soil. Uh-oh, look at all those. That's a little typos there, but not everyone chooses to have a service on Zoom. So we've done about 42 services, and then about half of the families choose to take all that soil home, and the rest are donating it. So we've donated about 35 cubic yards to our conservation partner in Washington State. And I think we're almost at 1,000 Recompose members. So that's exciting. Those are folks who said, yeah, I definitely know I want to be composted. Hopefully it's a long time from now. I'm 20 years old, I'm 30 years old, etc. But I'm signing up now because it's a way to just like let my friends and family know, and also a way to kind of put my money where my mouth is for this future service. I'm pretty sure I'm talking to the choir here when I say that healthy soil is the basis for all of human life. I'm guessing there's a few of you out there wondering why I keep saying soil and not compost, which is a completely fair question, and I don't have a great answer for it, except that we weren't sure that compost would resonate with everyone, so we thought maybe we could go a little more general with soil. But what we're doing is making compost. I'm going to get to some of the numbers on that in a minute if anyone wants to nerd out with me on that. But we all know that soil is a precious resource. It sequesters carbon, it filters water, it does all the work for us. And so the idea of being able to take your body and make big blocks of soil is really appealing to a lot of us. Okay, this is, I won't go into the details here, but one of our longest advisors, Dr. Lynn Carpenter-Boggs, is a soil scientist at Washington State University. She spent decades studying the composting of livestock, and spent the first 3 months with us as while we were starting up the greenhouse and getting people going in our composting vessels. She's also a dear friend, and we do compost testing on every single body's compost, but some of them we go a little deeper on just to see how the numbers are shaking out. And Lynn was finding that, in fact, yeah, this is actually pretty darn good compost, and it's made pretty quickly considering 6 weeks from start to finish. Even with all of that, we have a pH of 6.6. That's ideal for most plants. We have a pretty balanced nutrient content. Stable respiration tests. So nothing that's concerning. That's good. Nothing, I once said to Lynn, won't this be the most amazing compost anyone's ever made because it's human? Because, humans are amazing. And she was like, nope, it'll just be regular, probably just kind of pretty good compost. And I was like, okay, so I need to adjust my ego a little bit. That's fine. I will adjust my ego. And this compost is also pretty decent. Now that we've been doing the tests. It's taken us years to refine the recipe that we use. and the vessel system that we use. So I sometimes make it sound a bit easy to compost humans. It's totally possible and not very complicated to do in 6 months, 9 months, a year. What is taken a lot of time and testing and research has been how to get it down to a relatively short period so that we can have that person only taking up that vessel for a month. Because as you might just think about the basic numbers of it all, to make a business plan that works in a city where you're charging X number of dollars to spend that time in that hotel for the dead, it does matter how long each person is staying. We didn't want this to be an extremely expensive niche product or service. Depends on how we all care about carbon. That's not what I mean. Of course, we all care about carbon. We care about carbon drawdown. If you care about the numbers themselves, I can tell you that we have had a life cycle assessment by Dr. Troy Hoddle and looked at natural organic reduction or human composting compared to cremation and conventional burial. And Dr. Hoddle found that so there's the avoidance of the emissions that cremation and conventional burial create, which is great. So we avoid those emissions. And in fact, those emissions, they're about the same, those two practices, which is interesting. If you take the manufacture and transport of caskets and headstones, and then the upkeep of a cemetery, mowing that lawn, and then you look at the natural, excuse me, the fossil gas that's usually burned, the fossil fuels burned on the cremation side, those carbon footprints come out about the same. With natural organic reduction, we're avoiding that, but we're also sequestering carbon by taking wood chips or bodies and creating soil and putting that in the ground. So I think the number is around 1.4 metric tons of carbon that is saved all told when you choose recompose instead of cremation or burial. And there are the end of my slides. I'm fairly certain I've missed many things. I hope the questions will bring those to the surface. I'm in Denver right now because we are planning to build out a facility here in Denver. We're building out a larger facility in Seattle as we speak. We have to follow the law a little bit. So part of our work is changing the policy around how you can care for a body after it has died. And so we're working hard on California. There's a bill in New York. There's an exciting bill in Massachusetts, which is pretty close to Vermont. I don't think there's a bill in Vermont right now, but I could be wrong, in fact. And there's certainly a lot of excitement around changing death care practices, and Recompose is not the only one looking at the end of life, reconsidering how we're doing things, asking if we've really been doing it really as well as we could over the past 100 years. And the answer, well, we all know the answer is a no on that. And really looking at other ways that we can care for the dying, the dead, and ourselves when we lose someone. So I'm thrilled to be part of it, and hope you'll sign up, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Thank you, Katrina. Anybody who has questions, please feel free to type them into either the chat or the Q&A, whichever floats your boat. Yeah, I'm so fascinated by this whole process because it is the way that it's always been before we started to complicate it, as humans like to do, complicate things. And yeah, I think it's a really wonderful thing. And I also I appreciate the timeline because it shows that things take time to set up. And if you have a good idea that, just keep talking about it, working on it, sharing it with other people, and like the team and resources and things can come and help support it. And that's what's needed to make a world that's a little bit better than the one we're currently living in.
It's hard to explain well, I haven't figured out how to explain this in a talk, but the amount of good people that have emerged through the work and that we're totally critical to moving it forward. And in fact, that milestone timeline only started at 2017, but the idea was 2011 when I really started thinking about it. And so you just don't see all of that thinking and all of the people and the just the thoughtfulness that's gone into it. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And even, I mean, I would say even like our investors who we've brought on and continue to bring on today, they're using their resources. So we bring on people with wealth who want to make this change, who are heart aligned with our work, and they invest their money in this work. And so I guess, you know, it takes a lot of different skills and resources. And thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had a couple questions come in so far. One of them is from Joanne Noto, my mom. And she was wondering if someone has the ashes of a loved one, could those ashes be added to your pod and end up in your soil?
Yes, I love that question. We indeed ran some tests to make sure that wouldn't in any way harm the end result, and it's absolutely fine.
Cool. That's really awesome. And then someone else by the initials GMDO, they say, thanks for your work, Katrina. So inspiring. And they are planning a small green burial cemetery for their community on their land. And they were wondering if you have any insight on the pros and cons for this in a rural area.
Great question. I mean, I personally
here in Lickfield.
Oh, here, okay, great.
Yeah.
I personally think that natural burial is about perfect. Like it, you know, so natural burial is when you eschew the concrete grave liner and the big fancy casket and the mowing of the cemetery, and you put a body in the ground. And I just think it's beautiful. It was always an inspiration to me, and I think in rural settings it is pretty perfect. So I like the question because I mean, but composting is cool. So it's like, maybe you want to compost people. I mean, we do find that I have noticed that people are just jazzed by the idea of composting in a way that I don't, you know, there's excitement around natural burial, but some people are just like, I want to be composted. Like, I don't care if there's a natural burial cemetery here, but I just think as a process, it's pretty perfect for the rural setting. So I guess I mean, you could always, I suppose, do both somewhere, but I really like that option. Does that answer the question, hopefully?
I like that because they said yes, thanks. Because yeah, like I feel like the facility that you develop in this process is really helpful for areas with higher density, where there isn't the time and space for the natural version, the in nature version, in the earth itself version of human composting. But like green burials, like the OG human composting, it just doesn't have the like sexy name of getting composted. It's like we need to rebrand the green burials to be a little bit more enticing.
I totally think that would do it. And you know, really, I mean, there should be a bevy of options in the end that are earth aligned, or at least not harmful.
Yeah, totally. All right, we have a question from Casey Engels, who's actually next week's presenter, asking, how do we best support Recompose eventually coming to Vermont? Or I guess also any other state.
Yeah, so at first, so it's interesting. So when I say we lead legislation, in several states, we've hired lobbyists to help we can talk about lobbying another time, but to help lawmakers kind of make sure this has that a bill for this has priority, or keeps moving, I should say. What we found is that most bills are bipartisan. We've had several sponsors who were Republicans, and we've been able to kind of avoid any sort of being seen as like a niche Seattle environmental option, partly because in Washington, what happened, which I thought was amazing, was because we'd done the research at Washington State University out east, which is like an ag university, tons of farmers live out there. And because you can say like you to the legislators from the east side, you might have farmer friends who've composted cows and they're like, yeah, we do that. Or maybe you are a farmer legislator and you've composted a cow. So there's this really nice understanding, I think, by like more conservative communities. This isn't just like this environmental like, you know, idea. Like you don't have to drive a Prius to be composted. And so we haven't seen a ton of opposition except for the Catholic Church, but that's been kind of fairly minimal. Because like people are like, yeah, you should be able to choose what you want. Just because human composting is legal doesn't mean you have to choose it. That is something we have to sometimes tell people. We're not making you do this. But let's see, I guess so, but we do hire lobbyists sometimes for certain states, and then sometimes we have bills that are run by legislators themselves, like currently in Massachusetts, Representatives Lewis and Higgins are running a bill, and we're supporting them. Recompose is supporting them however we can with information, and we'll get letters written and everything like that. But in terms of Vermont, there was a bill a few years ago, and I'm not sure what happened, but it kind of lost some steam, I guess. And there's some nice momentum around it. I guess that's the best advice I would give, is to kind of like wait and see how the momentum shakes out, because I've been surprised to see bills popping up here and there.
Cool. And I think I saw on your website that there was a bill in California recently that didn't pass. Do you know what the margin was on that?
Well, I think I'm pretty sure it got, we went through 3 committees and it passed sometimes unanimously.
Mm-hmm.
And it went through the assembly and passed. But when it got to appropriations, which is the committee on money, it was not moved forward. So I don't even know that it was actually a vote. I can't remember what happened.
It's exactly, just like tabled it.
That is politics. And that was also, I believe, due to the gubernatorial recall. And just like the chaos that was happening in California then.
Yeah.
So that was a big disappointment, because California, we really want to be there, but we'll come back next year.
Yeah, cool. I'm originally from California and my family's out there. I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. Awesome. Diane Wing had a question. I might have missed it, but can you give a little bit more detail about how composting the body is done? I think they tuned in a little bit.
Great question, actually. So you saw those vessels. So the body is placed inside of a vessel on a bed of wood chips, alfalfa, and straw. And then it's covered with more of the same. So you're cocooned in one of those vessels all together. We then, for the first week, that vessel stays still and the body starts to decompose naturally. Microbes are doing the work. They are found in the air, on our bodies, they're on the wood chips. We don't have to inoculate a specific community of microbes, they exist. So what we need to see for safety and to make sure the process is working and the microbes are happy and doing their job is temperatures rise. This is thermophilic microbial communities are doing the work. So that means they're working at high heat levels. It's hotter than your backyard composting. Just to say, I think your backyard composting might get up to like 80, 90, 100. And what we need to see for this to be working is temperatures over 131 degrees Fahrenheit. And from a regulatory standpoint and from an operation standpoint, we want to see that 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 days, solid. And what Recompose, we see that a few times at Recompose over the month, but you have to see it once. That ensures that harmful pathogens are killed. So typically what we see is on day 2 or 3, a cool body, cool plant material, say 50 or 60 degrees. Typically we see a spike to 150 on day 2 or 3, which is, every time it happens, pretty magical. Because it's like, I can't really, even though I've been doing this for years, I can't quite believe that it really happens. You know, like I can't quite believe it'll really work. Then when you see the temperature spike, you know everything is going exactly as it should be. And I once had this, I think, brilliant designer say, maybe that's the moment the soul leaves the body. Maybe it's not on death. Maybe it's a couple days later. So about a week into the process, we rotate the vessels. They rotate very slowly. And we rotate them for a couple of hours to get a full mix of everything. And then we do that periodically every few days to ensure that everything's mixed, because oxygen has to get to all the parts of the body that have been breaking down and also to the plant material. And at 30 days, our staff removes the soil. It looks a lot like mulch at that point. And we screen the whole cubic yard for non-organics. So take out metals, take out any plastics, and then there's some tubing or something like that. And then larger bone fragments. By that time, almost all the bone has decomposed, but there's some larger fragments that we put through a processor. Everything gets broken down very small, and that goes together into a cure bin, which is really just a big box that we're aerating as well. And then after about another 2 weeks, sometimes 3, that soil, fluffy, dry, quite regular in size, is ready to go back to families. That's the whole thing.
That's awesome. So you monitor the temperature for every pod. What other things do you monitor?
I'll stick to Washington State, but the regulations in Washington State, we worked with the Department of Licensing and the Department of Health to figure out what regulations, as the sort of first operator in the space, what are the best regulations to make sure that any operator is making sure it's safe and it's effective. Temperatures monitored. So we did about like a 5-minute increment. So we actually have temperature sensors inside those vessels. And Recompose is also looking at moisture content, making sure that that's staying where we want it. And we also do pH testing at a couple points along the way, because that tells us some about how things are going as well. At the end of the process, the Department of Licensing requires, which we agree is a good idea, third-party compost testing. So that's to make sure that the pathogen count is very low. And that's been accomplished again by the heat that's been created. And so, but this is a nice sort of additional safety measures to get that compost tested by a third party. So then we can give it back to families. And then Recompose also does that same testing in-house, because we like to we want to keep understanding how we can improve, like how we can tweak, how we can possibly make the time frame a little bit shorter, but also how we can just make sure we're doing the best job possible.
Are there any things that would make someone ineligible to be recomposed?
Yes, I am embarrassed to say I'm probably going to miss one. There's not a lot of things. If you've had a radiation implant, which is like a physical seed implant, within 30 days, if it has been taken out or it's still in your body less than 30 days ago, then you have to wait till 30 days has passed, basically, to be, so that's one. Someone who's died of a prion disease, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, is not, and there's some research that composting breaks that down, but not enough. So that is not a candidate for NOR. And in Washington State, tuberculosis is also on that list. So if you died with tuberculosis, that you're not a candidate. Cool. And I believe that's it.
Cool. So not much.
Yeah, not much.
And I wonder if those folks could do a green burial in some places. I mean, but I imagine maybe not.
No. I would say they definitely could, because the reason that it's different for us is we're trying to take that material and give it back. But when you place a body in the ground, as long as you do it very safely, you know, as long as you wouldn't want to, like, you'd want to maybe take some extra precautions as you're handling the body, but I don't think there's any reason that couldn't have natural burial.
Cool. So they can do OG composting. Awesome. Joanne has another question, wondering about the cost of recomposing and the cost of a full service package.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. So for context, because I think it's important to have the context, conventional burial, which is with the casket and you know, the typical burial in the US, starts at around $12,000 if you have to get a plot and everything that goes into it, and goes up from there. So really it's very difficult. Maybe in Vermont, But most places, you're not going to get a conventional burial for less than $12,000. Cremation is quite cheap. Well, and Recompose will never really be flame cremation. And part of the reason is, well, I won't go into the details, will never really beat the price of the basic direct flame cremation. It can come in about $1,000 as is typically the lower cost for that. But an average cremation is around $6,000 in the US, because typically people are also purchasing an urn, having a service. So whatever funeral home ads go to that would make it about $6,000 average. Green burial totally varies. I almost don't want to talk about it I certainly can't talk about it in Vermont. In Washington, I can tell you, to get a plot and have a transportation to the plot and have the sort of like basic funeral home fees, it's around $7,000. Just to give you the sense. Right now, Recompose's price is $5,500. And we actually only did a whole package. So we decided, it kind of is again, it was like, we really want people to have the ritual. Like, we don't just want to be a disposal of bodies. We really want to be like more than that. So we created a full service, technically a funeral home. Our services staff is there to make it all happen. And we have one price, $5,500.
Cool. Yeah, it's like another layer of reconnecting people to the earth too, you know. That's awesome. Yeah, there was a comment saying that they agree about the ritual. It honors the deceased and the survivors and the earth. Alexandra Catazone asked, what do you do when the hotel is full? What happens to bodies then?
Such a good question. Well, when we opened in December, we actually we right away had a little wait list. And so we basically always have a little wait list, so what we do is try to not bring anyone into our care who's going to have to wait longer than a month. What we do is bodies go into cooled storage, which is actually very common in the funeral industry more broadly. So almost everyone goes into cooled storage if they're going to be cremated or whatever else. We don't embalm bodies, so we definitely can't take an embalmed body because they're actually totally trying to do opposite things. We're trying to encourage decomposition, and embalming is made to thwart it. So like that doesn't work. But refrigeration really slows the decomposition process very, very well. So we haven't. One of the reasons we're building a larger Seattle facility is because we haven't done a lot of advertising or outreach, and we know there's more demand than we're seeing right now. So I alluded to this at the beginning, you know, this is very analog. You need that place to put the body. And so the challenge is being able to build a facility. Our team is very skilled in that work. So taking old warehouse buildings, fitting them out to host arrays of vessels, and host people to come and have a gathering. So that part is a lot of fun. I mean, you can imagine all the good design that goes into that, and it's been a total joy. Like just today, we were looking at places in Denver, and it's like, this one's like funky, but in a good way. But like, can we make it work? And you know, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, so I think that asking about capacity is totally logical, and it's a good question. And we're just like, let's just open places and vessels as fast as we can.
Awesome. That's all of the questions so far. If you have any lingering questions, we have about 10 minutes left, so feel free to pop them into the Q&A or chat. Yeah, I was talking to some folks out here about it, and I feel like motivated to get a contingency of people to try and get some bills passed in Vermont. So you might not be the last you hear of me. And I also appreciate that you have, like on your team slide, you had such a diverse background and career of people involved. You know, it's much more complex than just, you know, being a funeral home in the same way, because it's trying to make a big shift in it. And especially like having death doulas, I know more and more people are becoming familiar with what a death doula is. And so many people, once they know about it, often say, oh, I wish that my grandfather, my father, my, aunt or uncle had someone, and that I had someone too during that process. So I just really appreciate that about what you all have going on.
Yeah, I'd say we're just beginning to, like, in Washington State, we have to hire licensed funeral directors, but we've always wanted to, and we will be able to, kind of, when we figure out the model, bring on folks who haven't gone to mortuary school, but do want to do this death care work. And it's really exciting to sort of figure out how to broaden the ability for people to join the industry that aren't coming through this very specific schooling and training program, because some of it you do need and some of it you don't. And so really excited to bring in a different group, or like broaden that, but also to death doula, just like thinking about death before it happens is also really exciting. Yeah.
Totally. We have a couple more questions. Sharon Carney asked, how are the vessels produced? What is the carbon footprint of production?
Ooh, I don't have the answer to that. It's a really good one off the top of my head. But they are steel, and they are produced in Michigan. How's that for an answer?
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, one of our focuses now that we're up and running is one of the focuses is making sure that the feedstock, that's the plant material, can be as local and as little of a carbon footprint as possible. And so some of the research we do on site and in-house is like, okay, what are the tweaks we can make on that side? So that's another place. I mean, the vessels are very important. The vessels last for like 20 to 30 years. So it's like, it's not something we would then, discard. So some of that carbon input is like less egregious on that end, but looking at the whole supply chain sort of cycle is really critical.
Awesome. An anonymous attendee asked if it's possible to be transported to Seattle or Colorado when you have vessels there in order to use the service, and do you help facilitate that process?
About 25% of our clients so far have come from out of state, up to Seattle. A number of those, I'd say probably half of those have come from California, but we had someone come from West Virginia, and so the answer is yes, of course. You can have your body shipped to us. It's not ideal from a carbon footprint standpoint. Oh, but I will say, I did the math a few years ago, and a trip from New York of your body will only lessen the carbon the carbon benefit by like 20% or something. So you're not
compared to like fire cremation.
Yeah, you're still you're still benefiting, but what we'd like to do is not fly people all over the country or the world. So that's part of the reason it's kind of exciting to be in Denver, because like it's that much closer to a lot of places. We don't pay for that, so that's an added cost to the client, but we do, like, our services staff will help. The answer, like the best next step is to like try to find the funeral home locally that will help. They do the transporting locally, and our services staff can also often help you find that funeral home. But it's like a Vermont funeral home, if you're in Vermont, would take your body, do the work there, work with your family there, put the body on the plane, and then we receive it in Seattle.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Someone else asked, can you explain the pre-compose process? Do you have to be a certain age to start?
I think you have to be 18. We have about 1,000 members right now, as I mentioned, and you can choose different payment plans. So we have like a $25 a month payment plan, $100. You can pay all at once if you want. All of that money by law goes into a trust, and it sits there until you die, except for 10%. So the 10% we get to have as operational revenue. But if you decided, I don't want this, actually, I want to be cremated, then you can have that money back. So it isn't money for Recompose now, but it is a really nice way, like I said, to show what you want to get it organized. We also, when you sign up for Recompose, you will have a we make the process as smooth as possible, but there's a number of forms that we do encourage you to fill out then, so that you kind of taken care of all the paperwork. So when you die, your family doesn't have to like fill out your vital statistics form. You've actually already filled that out, and we keep all that securely, and when you die, we'll be able to just unearth that, if you will, in 50 or 75 years. Or however many you decide.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really helpful. It's amazing how much taking the time to think and plan for your own death can ease the grieving time for your loved ones and not put more on their plate. Something that I have a lot of conversations with my own family about, which I'm grateful we can have those conversations.
If you go to our website, which is recompose.life, we have a planning ahead page, and that goes through it in great detail.
Awesome. Well, we are coming down to the end of it, just a few more minutes. So if there's one final question, we can answer that. Or if, oh, Katrina, what happens to the bones?
I think I answered it twice during this one. So if you don't remember, that's your fault for not paying attention.
Fair enough. One final question was asking about how they can check the status of Recompose in Massachusetts.
We have a public policy page on our website, which will give you a little update on the status. Be updated, so that's a great way.
Cool. And that's probably the best way to stay in touch with everything that's happening with Recompose.
Yeah, I would say if you come to our website, go sign up for the newsletter. We send it out once a month. It'll just give updates on where we are, bills that are happening, remind you to sign up for Recompose if you want to, and announces new staff come online, which I think is very fun. So go to our website, find the newsletter, put your name in. It's
perfect. Recompose.life. Easy.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us and get more people thinking about what to do when we die, and hopefully spark some conversations with loved ones too, to be like, I heard about this really awesome thing. Do you know you can compost yourself? I think it's totally doable. And next week, same time, same place, we are going to have a conversation with Casey Engels and myself, just an open conversation. So we're going to really be asking for a lot of questions from the audience as we go, to just kind of discuss how you design for dying. So I hope to see you then for that. And in the meantime, make sure if you haven't already, you get those links and social media handles so you can stay in touch with Recompose and Katrina and her team. Thank you again, Katrina, and I hope that you have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.